Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 2, season 2 of My Pop 5. Today, we have a phenomenal guest, Henri Bardot. Henri is a Portland, Oregon-based multi-instrumentalist, songwriter, and music producer. Henri's worked with artists such as Mree, Miel, his own work, and is one half of the duo Perlo. We opened today's episode listening to Day by Day by Perlo, which we talk about in the episode. We recorded this episode back in the fall, and since then, Henri's been hard at work on a new record, and his debut single is coming up soon on March 10th, so save the date. In the meantime, we were lucky enough to get a clip of the tune to share with you all as a sneak peek. So stay tuned to the end of today's episode and hear a bit of Henri's latest single. We hope you enjoy our interview, so here's our talk with Henri Bardot. Hello, we are here with the incredible musician, songwriter, producer out of the Portland, Oregon area, Mr. Henri Bardot. Henri, thanks so much for joining. We are so excited to meet and chat with you today.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. This is awesome.
I've been such a fan of yours, and I was trying to think back before we jumped on this call today, the first time I was kind of aware of your work. And I'm a drummer, just for some background. I know the audience knows this. And I was listening to a Mree record, Empty Nest, and I was listening to a tune called Trouble on that record, and you had played this like 7/8 groove or something on that record, and I was like, Oh my gosh, because I had been a fan of her work on her first 2 records, and when it came to that one, it was like big drums, and I was like, oh my gosh, who is this? And so that's when I first saw your name, and then there were multiple other moments where I'm a geek for album credits where I hear something and I try to see who's the songwriter on this, who's the producer.
My people.
Yeah. And I see all the time, you know, your name was popping up on both that project and then Perlo and the Miel record. And so I was just like, man, I got to talk to this guy. I'm such a fan of your work. So I'm really just
thank you,
so
man.
Thankful that you're here.
Yeah, Mree likes those odd meters. She likes to create a pain in my ass in the studio. She's like, so it's 7/8 for this section, and then there's a bar 5, and then the chorus is in 4/4. I'm like, okay, cool, let's go.
And it's like, to the common listener, like I remember on her record Into the Well, that opening tune on that one is also in 7, and there's just so much like cool stuff happening that like as an outside listener you probably don't notice, but then when I'm like trying to play, you just get lost in that stuff.
She's the greatest. Yeah, she's super good at making that stuff sound really natural.
It's so awesome. But anyway, why don't you tell us a bit about your background and kind of how you got into the music world, music producing world, and we'll kind of get into your Pop 5 here in a bit.
Well, I grew up on a little tiny island north of Seattle, like right next to Canada, and my dad came from a studio background in LA. He had a recording studio in LA for many years. And so when he moved up to Orcas and had me, 92, well, my mom had me, but he built a studio up there. And so kind of brought it up to the island. And then, so I sort of grew up like, you know, he'd have bands and artists come up and record. So I sort of like grew up in that world. And then as I got older, I wasn't really interested in it till really college, honestly, like the studio side of things. Like I got my first like M box when I was like 17 and went off to college in Seattle. And then just like ironically got super into it right as I left the actual island where all the gear was and all the cool stuff was. So I was like, now I want to go back. So then like, you know, winter breaks and stuff, I'd go up and like be like, whoa, so what's this do? And let me try to make this stuff sound good.
Yeah.
And then ended up making my first record up there. I think summer after my freshman year of college, when it was like, all right, let's see if we can like slay the dragon of all this stuff up here. Cause it's really intimidating at first when you have like, you know, it's going from like an M box and one mic to like a studio full of shit. You're just like, wait, can I swear?
Yeah,
actually?
as much as you want. You're good. You're good.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I have a foul mouth, but
same. A lot of musicians do. It's kind of interesting how that works.
I have to keep it in check, but yeah, I mean, and so I just, you know, it's like a great problem to have. It's just like too much stuff. You're just like, what do I use? And so it was mostly just like nights and nights of Googling and watching, you know, like Pensado's place and just like getting super geeky with the gear to figure out like how it all works.
It's awesome that you had the privilege to have that, you know, stuff to play with too.
It's the luckiest. I mean, it's like a once in a million year lucky strike of luck. Yeah, it makes no sense. Like I just like a studio. Like I was interning at a studio in Seattle that at that time because I wanted to get more into it, and like I would be in the studio working, like, you know, getting people coffee and shit. Like I could like, if I played my cards right, I could get like an hour of studio time at the studio, like when no one was recording in the middle of the night and shit. But then, you know, I could like go up to Orcus and just like have this whole thing at my disposal. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And where did you go to school, and was it for music production?
I started off at UW in Seattle, and then also at the Bothell campus, and that's where I started. You know, I wasn't going to school for recording at that time, but I realized I was really into it, and so I started interning at Studio X in Seattle. It's no longer there, but really really cool studio. From there, realized I wasn't really into like school. I just wanted to record all the time. So then I transferred to a school specifically for production and recording in Minneapolis.
Yeah, that's amazing. School's not for everyone. And I think when you're, especially in the arts, you know, you look at most artists and not many of them are trained in academia, but are just artists and creators.
Yeah, I had a really hard time. Like I just could not stay focused. I would like take like 25-minute long bathroom breaks and just go like play piano and listen to music. And just like I just couldn't keep it together.
Yeah, totally. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get into the bulk of this. We ask every guest before we start here, can you list your pop 5 with no comment, no context? What was your pop 5?
Okay, so the way I went about this was such a hard thing that I like could not. I was trying to figure out what is the approach, because like you could go in so many different directions.
Yeah.
So I kept it to like ages 1 to 18.
Okay.
I wanted to keep it like, because it was supposed to be influential. So like, you know, shit I listened to last week influences me now, but it's just an endless, the snake starts to turn and eat its own tail. So I was just like, all right, I gotta contain this to something. So I kept it to 1 to 18. So it starts off Tom Waits, Early Years Vol.2, Zelda, Ocarina of Time, Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, Illinois by Sufjan, and then Just Kids by Patti Smith.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So it's so funny that you said that, because almost everyone has the same reaction. Like, how do you choose just 5? You know, but one of the most beautiful things is we're very loose about it because we like seeing all the different ways people will approach it, you know? So yeah, that's so awesome.
Yeah. So I tried to keep it like, so I kind of tried to pace it out like across my, upbringing. So I don't know if you want to jump right into it.
Let's do it. Let's talk about Tom Waits and kind of what influence he had on you, both as an artist and as a person, and tell me why he's on your pop 5.
So this record I wouldn't say this is like one of my favorite Tom Waits records. This is like demos that he recorded 2 years before Closing Time came out, his first record. And it didn't get released until 92, the year I was born. So it came out right when I was born. And my mom, when I was growing up, had this like really big, huge room that was like an art studio that she would just like go crazy in. And there was just like art supplies everywhere. And just like, it was super chaotic, but really cool and creative. And she had this boombox, and she would always have this record on. So this is like one of the first things like I can remember hearing as a kid.
Yeah.
It was this and like Sting and Van Morrison. It was like those 3 things were just like constantly on a loop. Sting was a little like new agey or something for me at the time. And then Van Morrison, I liked some of it. He's kind of sounded like a Muppet to me. And so I was as a kid, wasn't that into it. And then the Tom Waits record, he also is like Muppet adjacent in ways. But he also like, this record is really stripped down and just like pretty. Like it's like one of the it's just like him playing songs like with his young Tom Waits voice, like singing high. Like he never sings high. Like it's so bizarre hearing these songs. There's this song I Want You that is like probably my favorite song from the record. That is like not a lot of people know, and it's just like the simplest, sweetest little song. And I'm like, this is not how Tom Waits makes music anymore. Like it's like, it was such a small era of his process. But there's also an amazing version of Old 55 on acoustic guitar that was like one of the first things that like I got into as like wanting to play acoustic guitar. I was like, that's what I want to learn. And so I learned that. I was like one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar. And then this song Mockingbird that I don't know if he ever re-released, but that was like, to a kid, it's just the songs were silly. Like as a little kid, like he's such a silly guy, and like, he also does like comedy and like is one of the funniest people ever. And like he says shit like lickety splitly and just like says the weirdest shit, like the shit that like catches your ear as a kid. You're like, whoa, that's silly. What is this old dude talking about? And so I just like gravitated towards it and learned Mockingbird. Like Mockingbird was one of the first songs on piano, like because it's really easy. And so like I'm just like toying around, like, oh, that kind of sounds like that song, Mockingbird, and then you just kind of figure it out.
Yeah, you said a lot that I want to touch on. One of my favorite things when going back and listening to this before we jumped on is I think you've talked about his career spans for so long that like if you listen to the more recent Tom Waits stuff and this older stuff, it's almost like what feels like two different artists, both sonically and lyrically.
Completely.
That it's so interesting to kind of see his career arc and going back to this moment and feeling what the snapshot was like. But I think one of the things that's so beautiful about his artistry is that, especially in this, the instrumentation is so simple, but yet everything still carries that like punch and that emotion. And you can feel the comedy in aspects too, right? So you get kind of all aspects of feeling and emotion throughout the entire thing. And I wrote down Lickety Splitly as well, because he opens the tune with it, but it almost like it does, maybe as a kid, you're right, it makes you laugh, right? But like
it's
when I'm
silly.
listening as an adult, it is silly, but it didn't take me out of the song. You know, there's others who I think
he's the only one. Yeah, he's able to like work this like really avant-garde experimental shit into his like pretty little songs, and it somehow works. It's insane.
Yeah, it really blows my mind, his ability to be able to do that. And, you know, the punch that comes with the way this tune starts, even just like the picking pattern on I Want You, like you talked about it. It's one of those things where like, it sounds like I've heard it before, but it's also like so unique. And yeah, I hope I don't fall in love with you. Just there's so many good tunes on that whole record, and it just feels so good. I'm very surprised that as a young kid, you gravitated to it. You know, what do you think it was about it being that young that you were able to like appreciate it, you know, being so young? Because most kids aren't loving this soft acoustic music.
I've always liked, far back as I can remember, I've just like, if I hear something melancholy and like really emotive and like vulnerable, I'm just like that, like always since I was a little kid. So there was something that felt like this felt like the most like, you know, like, I mean, this was also one of the only three things I was literally hearing. So like, it was like, I had three options: Sting, Van Morrison, or Tom Waits. Like that, my mom, that's just what she gave us. So with the other two, like it felt like they took it kind of seriously. Like, I mean, Sting and Van Morrison are great artists, obviously, but like as a kid, like there was something playful that I loved about that specific Tom Waits. You know, if it was like Rain Dogs or something, I don't think I would have been like, yo, let me hear that again. But like that record was just like super playful and approachable. Like it was, you know, now like probably Meal Variations is my favorite record, like actually, like, you know, as like an adult, but this was just like a simple, I think one of the easier ways in as a kid, actually, because it was so stripped down. It was like easy to understand. Like, you know, some of his shit gets really like kind of chaotic and dark and kind of wild, like later, you know, he has so many records, but yeah, this one just like I could understand more probably than if I would have heard, you know, Real Gone or something.
Yeah. As a creator yourself, has this been something that's influenced you either as a producer or as a songwriter? And if so, what are the biggest ways in which it has? We'll get back to the show in just a moment. We're pausing for a brief moment because we want to talk about some ways you can help support the show. The truth is, you're already supporting just by listening. But in season 2, one of our biggest goals is connecting with you. So if you're interested in helping us out, here are some ways you can support. Number 1, rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Number 2, follow us on Instagram at MyPop5. And number 3, share your favorite episode or the show with a friend and tag us when you do. Art is at the center of what we do here, and I mentioned we want to connect with you. So if you share the show with a friend and let us know, we're going to pick someone every week and buy you that vinyl, book, or movie that's been sitting on your wish list. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and we'll get back to the show.
I think his other records probably like realistically have influenced me more in terms of like sounds I'm going for, like especially Meal Variations, like that record, like the piano sounds in that record, the drum sounds, like the horns, like everything, the woodwinds, like everything on that record is like sonically like exactly like my sweet spot. Like that's like that's what I'm going for basically. Like if I could get an upright piano to sound like anything, it would be that record. Yeah. So in terms of like production references, I would say that his later stuff probably influenced me more, but on that early stuff, like there's something that I still love about just like a stripped down folk song, you know, like I got really into Dylan like later in life. Like I wasn't into Dylan at this time. I didn't listen to like Dylan at all until I was like 19 or 20. It's kind of crazy, but like those songs, like, you know, he's obviously the master at that, like just a super simple, stripped down, really well crafted, like song. I'll like troubadour style. Like I still like if I see that at a show, like that kind of grips me the most to this day.
Yeah, I think I'm going to compliment a little bit, right? But I think when I'm looking at your work and at least the stuff that I've listened to, and I don't know how much of an involvement was like, Miel as a songwriter and you were doing the production, but when I think about like the production on Columbus Day, the opening tune on that record, I still get that same sentiment of everything being stripped back, in terms of instrumentation. There's a bunch of beautiful things with like vocal layering and stuff like that. That's not on Tom Waits records, but like in even that simple, pop sphere, not saying pop is simple, but like in the simplicity of the minimal instrumentation that you have on that opening tune, like that's where I kind of heard some of the influence as well. Again,
for sure.
I don't know how much you were involved with the songwriting, but at least from the production elements, like it's something
involved.
where I've felt it the most, where I was just like, oh, this is where I heard it. And that's kind of the things that I was thinking back to when I was listening to your stuff.
Totally. That intimate thing, like the intimacy of that, of a record like that, like that's ideally what I like. I like intimate shit. Like that's like everything I don't gravitate really towards like really like a lot of stuff going on. Like I like sort of like, even if there is a lot of stuff, like subtle stuff. Like I'm not really into like harsh sounds. I don't like loud noises. Like I can't, like my ears are super sensitive and like that like, literally just hurts my ears. Like if I hear like a music that a ton of people love and it's like amazing music, but like it's just not for me because like I want soft things. Like I just like have always been that way. Like
fair enough.
Yeah.
In regards to that record that we were talking about, I don't know if this is true. You can kind of tell us the story, but is it true that you made that record in like a cabin or like a barn or something like that?
Which one?
The Miel record?
Oh yeah, we did make that in a barn. Yeah, the shop I was talking about, the like the arts and crafts studio my mom has is the bottom floor of a horse barn. And so the upstairs is like this like really open air like barn, and the bottom is like a art studio and horse stalls. And so that's when Miel approached me after she was coming out of kind of a brutal breakup situation. We were like, well, what better place? She kind of retreated up there, to like kind of recoup. And so that was sort of like the place to do it.
That's awesome. And I think that isolated feeling you get musically, I think also is the setting, I'm sure, when you were creating that as well.
It's very isolated. Yeah. There are no neighbors near. Like we grew up like with people like, oh yeah, I like went over to my friend's house. I just walked over. I'm like, walked over to your friend's house. Like we lived like on the top of a mountain in the woods. Like there was no friends to be had near us.
Yeah. Oh, that's crazy. And so is everyone in your family a musician then, or is music play a big role in your family?
Very big. Yeah. Miel and my dad, obviously, he would do like commercials. Like he wrote a ton of music for like commercials in the 80s and 90s at the studio that he had. And my mom's got a nice voice, and my sister Minnie has a nice voice as well. And yeah, it's been we'll do like family harmonies and stuff like that.
There's nothing better, man. Like I think anytime like you hear siblings that like sing together, it's like there's no amount of professional vocalists that you could get together that could get those same types of vocal blends, know?
Especially with Miel, we talk about it all the time. Like it is, I'm just putting the finishing touches on my next solo record. And I was just up on Orcus with her working on stuff, and like her voice is so creepily the same as mine. Like, so if you take her voice and like pitch shift it down, just like 80 cents, it literally, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
It's like this blood harmony, creepy, like energy going on. I don't know.
That's the best shit, man, when you can get that. And I'm glad you have that too, cause like when you're like needing harmonies or something and you could pull from that, you're like, there's not going to be anything better, that I could
exactly. Pull. And then I have my wife is like the best singer that's ever lived. So it's like game over. I'm just like, I'm set on background vocals.
Totally. When I think about, your guys' project together, Perlo, her voice is, just angel smooth, beautiful, everything she touches,
it's ridiculous.
Right? But what I love about when you guys sing together, so in contrary to what you have like with your sister and like that like sibling blend, I think when you and Mree sing together, it's one of those things where it's almost like a new instrument. You guys can be singing unison in different octaves or whatever, right? But unison tones, and like the blend that you two have together, it's like this separately, obviously, both have beautiful voices, but I think together there's something special there too. I think of Day by Day, that tune that you guys have there, and most of what you're singing is in unison. But like, there's so many moments that I'm like, this sounds like if it was like one thing all the time, if there was one person that could produce both when they're singing, it's like the perfect pair. So yeah, you're super lucky to have both of those options.
For sure. I've had a lot of luck in my life. It's like whenever I record a vocal for Perlo stuff, then like I'm always like, oh, this sounds like a song. Like I could release this. This sounds done-ish. And then like I'm like, all right, Mree, time to do your vocal. And like she does her vocal, and I'm just like, I would never, like, if I mute her, I want to throw it in the garbage now. Like, it just takes every vocal and makes it sound so much better that I'm like, all right, should I even make music by myself anymore?
Yeah. How did you end up meeting her and, get involved with with her and her music?
I was she was going to school her first year of college, and I was in New York for a week setting up a studio for a buddy of mine. And I just reached out to her and asked if she knew my music a little bit, and I obviously was a fan of hers. And so I just reached out and asked if she wanted to like hang out, basically, just like get dinner. And then we got dinner and have been together since like that night. It's pretty crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
a one night situation. Yeah.
I know. It was like actual like love at first sight type of situation. Like we met, went to dinner, and then like have talked every day since then. That was like 9 years ago. It's like pretty crazy.
Wow. That's a good story, man. Well, anyway, I want to kind of get into your next thing here. I don't want to keep you too long. Zelda, Ocarina of Time. Let's talk about that. Are you a big gamer in general? And how did this kind of come into your life?
So Mree's definitely the gamer of the family. I have played, I've like fallen really hard for a few games. I'm not like, I don't game like on a daily basis. Like I rarely play. I'm more of like watch a basketball game type of guy. But when I was a kid, and this came out when I was 6. And so my older Miel, obviously she's 3 years older. So she was 9. And like, I don't know if you've played this game, but it's not like the easiest game. Like if you're 6 years old, like and also like the concepts, like it's kind of advanced. So she started playing it on N64 when we were kids, and I was just watching basically. And then like she would let me play a little, and then like we made it through like the Deku tree, which is like the one of the first levels in the game. Every game I'd played before then, like we played a lot of like Banjo-Kazooie and like Mario Kart and Star Fox and stuff like that. And so when we played this, I literally thought that was the end of the game. Like I thought the Deku tree was the game, because it was super like long. Like it was like weeks went by of us in this fucking Deku tree trying to like beat this tree. And we finally beat the tree, and I'm like, all right, we beat the game. Then it's like, just kidding. Now you go to Hyrule. And I was like, whoa, like it was just something I'd never experienced something so vast. And then the music like was just one of those things. I've played a lot of games, but the music rarely sticks with you in that way. Like it's still, the music from this game specifically like is what we have on like when we have dinner. Like this is like on at our house like all the time. Like this is just the music that if Mree, there's a piano nearby, I'm like, Mree, can you play the Song of Storms, please? Like, and she'll just like play that for an hour, and like that's like my like happy place. Like it just relaxes me so much. So that, and then just like the whimsy of that game, it just was super calming. Like even just as a viewer, like I was just watching my sister play mostly, but like being like, oh, look over there. Like, oh, there's a crack in the wall there. Like blow that up. And then just like vibing out with the music and just like rainy Hyrule. Like that's the best.
Wow. Yeah. We actually have had another discussion about this game, and it's funny. Daniel will laugh because like the last person we had that was talking about it like was making fun of people who first played that game on like an emulator and didn't have the chance to like play it on N64 first. So I was watching Daniel's face as you brought up this game, because last time she like was roasting like, oh my gosh, if you played it on an emulator, you were a dummy, or just whatever, all these words. And Daniel was like, just chimes in on the mic, I played it on an emulator. So there's some.
Hey man, any way you want to play it, I'm all for it.
Yeah. So there's some insight.
I've been wishing they would re-release it on the Switch. Like I was so bummed when they didn't do that. I mean, we're playing the new one. What is it?
Breath of the Wild.
Sword?
Oh no, that one. Yeah.
No, the Skyward Sword remake they just put out. We're like almost done with that right now. But yeah, we played Breath of the Wild too, though. I personally love Breath of the Wild. The music from that I loved as well. And I'm into games where like there's no end in sight. Like I don't want to ever, I get depressed when you start to get to the end of a game. So like I'm made for a game that just literally never ends. Like it took us like 2 years to do everything in that game. And like, that's what I want. I'm like, I got my money's worth, baby. But yeah, we loved that game. But like when they remade Skyward Sword, I was like, how about you remake Ocarina of Time? Like, please, like if you can do it for Skyward Sword, do it for, it's such a better game.
Yeah. I wonder if they're just scared of the backlash if it's not everything that they want it to be, you know?
True.
And
yeah, it's pretty loaded.
Yeah. What I think is crazy though is how innovative that game was for its time, right? So, you know, you already mentioned it a little bit about how most of those games were like, you're on a track. There's only so much you can do, and there's not like an open world nature to the game of being able to explore. But it's Star Fox, you're literally can only go forward. Yeah, right. You know,
you try to turn around and it just flips you back.
Exactly.
Do a barrel roll.
Yeah, like I mean, and Star Fox is actually one of my favorite games when I was growing up. You know, but you could beat that game in 45 minutes and call it a day. You know,
for sure.
But yeah, this being like its first open world nature and like the ability to travel to like, you know, new worlds and things like that was insane, and how high rated of a game it was. I just wonder, like I mentioned, you know, is this something that they're like, we can't recreate this, you know, it was so special for what it was.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think I didn't really grow up on Zelda. It wasn't until I was in high school that there was this jazz group that I was into, and they were doing all kinds of covers. They released this mixtape where they were doing all kinds of weird or I guess just kind of unorthodox jazz covers, and they had done this little medley of Saria's songs and the title theme and Song of Storm. I would always hear about it, like just in music in general. And then ever since then, like in high school, you know, I went and I was like, I got to play this game. And so I ended up, you know, just like playing it on my computer and falling in love with it, and then playing like every game in the series. So it was actually the music that brought me into it.
It's the best. It's the best. I mean, like we'll just do random like Spotify playlists or Spotify radio, whatever, of just like people doing covers of the Zelda songs, because we've like worn out the actual version so many times that we're just like, we're listening to like random people playing these songs on like, you know, Casio pianos in their like bedrooms, and I'm like into it fully.
Nice. Have you ever, you know, thought about sampling or using any of that stuff in your work, or have you?
Mree's actually Song of Storms is going to be on her next. She's making well, actually, I don't know if I'm allowed to like announce this.
We can cut it. We can cut it.
Okay. I'm not sure. I'll ask her. But she's doing like video game covers.
Oh, cool.
Actually, no, I can announce. She's already put out 2 of them. So it's not a secret.
Yeah.
Everyone should check those out. They're dope. But one of them is from Zelda, and that'll be on the EP. So it's pretty exciting.
That's amazing. And she did stuff for Final Fantasy or something too, right?
She's done She's done Kingdom Hearts.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, she's done Undertale, tons of games.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, music is the whole reason I think we're both here, you know, talking about this stuff. So it's so cool to hear that you appreciate it that way. When you were playing the game, though, this is what I was trying to get to: the ocarina itself. Did you ever get creative with making your own tunes and trying to do your own stuff?
Right. How you could use the buttons to play different notes. Honestly, no. There's been a few games like that where like you can make your own songs in the game, and I'm always just like, get me through to the next situation. Like I'm not trying to like sit here and that wasn't giving me any
I love that,
any creative juices.
That was one of my favorite things in hindsight, is seeing like the YouTube videos of people who are like playing Never Gonna Give You Up or whatever on Ocarina, and they're in the game doing those things. So
maybe if I was like 6, so that would be some Prodigy shit if I was like figuring out songs by ear on the Ocarina. Like I wasn't there yet.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, well, let's kind of move on to your next one here. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, Eternal Sunshine. How did this come up in your life, and why was it so impactful for you?
Again, the music played a huge role. This is like another, like we've listened to this soundtrack. Like this was the first time I heard John Bryan, like in anything, scoring anything. And we were both like just floored by this. So this is like one of the things that like we listen to this soundtrack constantly at home and like in the car. And this is like a heavy rotation around here. But I mean, it came out when I was 12. I'd only really known Jim Carrey from, you know, Ace Ventura and like, you know, like comedic stuff. And so when this came out, I was a little young. I don't think I saw it when I was 12. I think I saw it in like early high school. It just kind of like broke my brain. Like I'd never seen any Charlie Kaufman movie before. So like I wasn't used to like the surrealist sort of like really jerky pacing and like really kind of like kooky details in his movies and like almost like science fiction-y. And it just like the feelings, the visuals and like the music and the visuals and the story and the characters, like the feelings it was giving me was like the exact melancholy that like I was talking about that like I'm super drawn to. Like it was like that, like distilled, like it was like the perfect confluence of things to like give me that feeling that I'm like chasing, especially like even the first like 30 minutes of that movie, like when they go to Montauk and like they don't know that they've already had a whole relationship and the music's playing and they're on the beach and the cold like snowy beach shit, like that is perfect to me. Like that I could watch that first 30 minutes like on a loop forever.
Yeah. For the audience, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a movie with Jim Carrey in his first, like, I don't know if it was his first one, but a very serious role. It was not The Mask Jim Carrey or Liar Liar Jim Carrey, but it's a story about these lovers or former lovers who they're in a world where there's an ability to kind of erase someone from your own memory. And it's a non-linear story, so you don't kind of know what's going on the whole time, understanding that these characters had already erased each other from each other's mind, and you kind of follow these stories of the process of erasing one from each other's mind and, not understanding at which point you are in the story. But what you're calling out at the beginning of the film, Henry, is that first 30 minutes is basically the end, but you don't know that that's the end of the movie, right? You think it's like the very beginning, and it's after they had already, you think it's a meet cute, these two lovers finding each other, but it's actually them re-finding each other after they had erased each other from each other's memory. And that moment is just like, I think about it in two ways, and I'll kind of tell my story here briefly, but I actually watched this movie, funnily enough, on the date of Obama's first inauguration. I remember being at this girl's house that I had a crush on in high school as well. And she's like, "Hey, you want to come over? My grandma's throwing an Obama party in case he gets elected tonight." And I'm like,
and that's like the fun movie they threw on to like get the crowd riled up.
I wish I remember like what the context was, but I just remember being just like with her in the living room. Like, I don't remember if it was after he won and we were like celebrating to put on this movie or before, but whatever. I was sitting on the couch watching this movie with her and being confused for the first, half of the movie because you don't know what the heck is going on. But then after, I remember it was like one of the first times that a movie just like left me wanting to sit on that couch, like thinking about what I just watched and that feeling of melancholy and stuff that you talked about. Cause it's like, has a decent ending, but it's also just like, the weight of all the emotion that comes through it, I think is carried in both the music, but just the feeling like throughout. And when I go back and rewatch it, I'm transported back to that space of being like just sunk on the couch, like after that whole thing happened and just the emotional weight that it had. So yeah, the movie's just stinking incredible.
Yeah. I mean, most of his movies that he wrote, Charlie Kaufman, like I would later like get very into all of his movies. But at that time, like it just floored. Like it was the first movie I saw that I was like, I need to rewatch that immediately.
Yeah.
Like I like movies like that where like you see it and it works on the first watch, but then you're like, I could watch that 20 more times and like still get new little details from it and like new plot points.
Yeah. I have to ask this question because I think there's debate on the internet, and a discourse even amongst friends about it. What do you think the message is, or what was your takeaway in terms of the message of the film?
The message of the
film. If there is one.
Yeah. I mean, to an extent that you can't fight what your natural feelings are. Like, your gut feelings towards something is going to keep coming back until you fully explored it. You can't like shortcut that.
Yeah.
And then at the end, like that you just have to if there's still a feeling there of like yearning or like, like if you're not over something, you have to give it a shot. Like you can't, it's always going to be lingering there subconsciously. Like this movie's pointing out, like it's going to be there regardless until you've like fully gotten closure.
Yeah. What I think is interesting is, a lot of what I think people say is like the whole true love conquers all kind of thing, that even in spite of erasing your own memory, like love can prevail, is kind of one way of looking at it. What I've always thought is interesting about the film is, and you can kind of see it in multiple different characters, right? Where like the Kristen Dunst character, she also had her mind erased at one point and then still has an affair with the doctor, you know, again, even after having erased their memory. Is I think there's something to be said about, unless you have your memories there to aid you in terms of either preventing you from further heartbreak or from making a mistake potentially again, there's something there to be said about your memories help inform all of your decision making in the future, right? So if you made the decision once, you're likely to make the decision again, unless you've had life influences that would tell you not to make that same decision, you know?
For sure. Yeah. If I was in that movie, I would have been like, so whoever I erase, I'm going to move across the country so that I'll never like bump into them again. Because obviously there's a chemistry there.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so interesting. And then this is completely separate topic, but like, I think it's insane. I mentioned Kristen Dunst, but like that whole cast was insane for like an independent type of film.
Ruffalo,
Elijah Wood, David Cross.
Yeah. Elijah Wood. Yeah.
And then Kate Winslet, of course, is the female lead.
Right.
And she just is phenomenal.
Yeah, that was a stacked cast.
Yeah. Are there any moments when you look back on the film, like any small snapshots that like stick with you the most, visually or anything?
Probably the train, the train coming back from Montauk, like that train ride, just like that feeling of like the excitement of like there's someone and you're really drawn to them and you want to get to know them, but like, you know, are they into this? Like, am I allowed to just approach you and start talking to you and getting to know you? Like, and the way that she like pushes back and like just that, like the dynamic between those two characters on that train, like is just it's so alive. Like it's the feeling that we've all had. Like and then just like the music and the feelings and like the visuals as well. Like of just like there's just this like sadness to that movie. Actually, there's a story. I was so obsessed with that movie. I would like watch like all the behind the scenes and like the interviews with the actors and stuff. And Jim Carrey told the story that like he met Michel Gondry, like months before filming to like, you know, talk about the movie and like get fully cast and everything. And like, so they had talked, and Jim Carrey was like going through a really rough patch. Like he had just got out of a relationship and was like this like broken man at the time. And Michelle, the director, was like, he's like, I know you're in a really tough spot, but like, please stay like this until we film, because this is going to be perfect in the movie. And so he's like, I know like personally you're really fucked up, but like this is going to read so perfect if you can stay in this headspace. So like stay miserable so that when you come to shoot, it's going to be perfect. Wow. And it was similar. I like always talked about this with Miel, because when she got out of her relationship and like was like, I think I want to put all this shit into like a record. I was like, okay, I was working on a different record and I was like, I can't work with you for a month, but like this place you're in, this like just raw, ruined place, like you got to stay in this place for like a couple more months, or else this record's not going to be good.
You're like, as a brother, this is the worst advice, but as a creator,
I want you to heal, but just like in 3 months.
Oh man, that's so like when you think about yourself in those moments, though, like, all you want to do is get out of that. So I can't even imagine, you know, trying to stay there. What's interesting though is now that I hear that story, it makes sense. But as an observer, even just like from taking it in as art perspective, when you're watching Jim Carrey's character, it makes sense after the fact that, you know, he doesn't know her and he doesn't know that he wiped her from his memory, you know, at the beginning. And I think even with her too, that sense of melancholy that you talked about from like the music perspective, I think it's interesting because I think it's a feeling that hasn't really been captured in the same way. I don't think in many other places, where even without memories kind of aiding the hurt, there's that like, I think sense that everyone can have when you're down sometimes of like, there's sometimes like I feel sad and feel heartbroken or like tired about things, but with no reason as to why, you know. And the movie explains it away as because you wiped away this memory, the heartbreak didn't actually go away, but it did because you were able to wipe it, but you still have this feeling, right? And regardless of memories, there's something that kind of impacts you. And I don't have any other way of explaining it, but I think that movie captures it beautifully.
I think there's something there for sure with like kind of back to what I was saying of like, you can't shortcut growing. Like you can't shortcut closure. Like you can't shortcut like working through something. Like you can try to forget it, but like it's in there still. And like, you're going to be fucked up about it. It's going to emerge at some point and resurface. Like there's really no way to just like, you know, cut the cord and be like, hey, this trauma happened or whatever back at that time. And I'm not going to actually work through it. I'm just going to like it's just over now.
Yeah.
I'm over it. Like, all right, move on.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't work.
Yeah. I had gone through a breakup in 2020, and it was something that like I was going through. And one of the pieces of advice is that a friend gave me that really helped me was one of those things where I was hurting, and my friend kind of had said, hey, if you broke your leg, you could try to put it in a cast, bandage it, take Tylenol, all these things. Like you can do all this stuff to try and aid yourself through the process. But at the end of the day, it still takes 6 weeks to heal, right? So you still just kind of have to go through the healing process on its own. And it's a good reminder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of get into your next thing here, Mr. Sufjan Stevens and the Illinois record. And let's talk all about that.
So this, I don't know how, if you're a Sufjan fan, but yeah, this came out when I was like in middle school, and it was probably like the most similarly stopped me in my tracks. And I had to like listen to it. I mean, that record's such a beast. Like you have to listen to it 50 times to like even come close to hearing everything that's going on. But it was, I'd never heard anything like it. And like, I feel like as I've been making music for a while, like doing that, like accomplishing that, where like you hear something, you're like, oh, I've never heard anything like this before. Like that's fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like it's so rare to achieve that. And like, I don't think that's a lot of people's goal. Like, and what hasn't been my goal at times, you know, like you don't like, that's really scary to try. Like, hey, I've never heard this work, and I've never heard anyone do anything like this, but I'm just going to do it because fuck it. And why not?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, you can like really fall on your face doing that. And like, and he just said, fuck it. And made this like crazy album with like 22 songs on it, and then a whole nother album of 21 songs that came out right after of like outtakes from this album that I loved like just as much as this. That's like 50 songs almost. Like that he just like he's just such a creative force.
Yeah.
Like it was just like overwhelming to hear all this and the fact that he did it like DIY. Like this is like, you know, recording in like friends' apartments, and like you could just tell it was this like labor of love. Like he's not like controlled by our record company being like, hey, we need another album, get into the studio and pump that thing out. Like he's just like a maniac, like just a creative maniac, like going crazy and recording all over the place with whatever he can find, and just writing like song after song after song after song. And, you know, many of the songs like don't adhere to a meter and don't adhere to a tempo, and like they're just like, it's really like something special. Like whenever I go back to that album, I'm just like, this is like really special.
Yeah.
Like, not a lot of people have made anything that can compare to this.
Yeah. What I think is interesting, you know, it's so revered, you know, especially in the, you know, indie world of sorts, you know, but that it was like his 5th album, you know, like there was multiple attempts before this, and like kind of got to this point where, you know, when I look back and like think back to what was happening in music at that time, of course, there are so many people who have tried to do the same thing in hindsight. So I think if someone was listening for the first time today, of course, there are going to be so many elements that are just like, this is still so innovative and amazing. But like, there are people who have tried to kind of rip off and do some of this.
He's had a lot of, the quirky, you know, horn arrangements and, you know, the quirky percussion.
But at that time, there was nothing like it, you know, and when it first came through, all those complex orchestrations. And what really blows my mind is he did it all alone. Right? Like it was just like he layered in all the horns and orchestra sound.
And he played like 3/4 of the instruments. Like he played like 20 instruments on the record.
It's just so insane how that happened. And I love how it's not very like song. It's like there's interludes and these minute-long things that are just transitions into the next thing. And one of my favorite things about it is the tune with I'm forgetting the serial killer
John Wayne Gacy.
John Wayne Gacy. That tune, you know, you're hearing all these like dark allusions to who that man was and everything you do, but all in this like quirky, whimsical type of tune that's not as like, you know, dark as the lyrics make it seem to be. But yeah, just an impeccable job on that whole record.
It's a big swing for sure. Like the fact that he took that big of a swing on so many of those songs, and like everyone just heard it and went, yeah, this is legit. We all love this. Like it just is so crazy. Like like thinking about the process of making those songs, like you have to have some balls to do that.
Yeah. And it's a concept record too about the state of Illinois, you know, like so many references to cities and holidays and people from that space. It's just, it was a swing, like you mentioned, and it worked.
There's a lot of music I feel like that has like a similar aesthetic, but like the way his music balances like sounding almost like childish in the way that like it sounds like a sixth grade like orchestra performance, but then like the arrangements are actually super deep and like somewhat heady. It's like the combination of like the high art and low art. It's like there's not a lot of people who can do both. Like there's some people who have like stuff that sonically can sound like him, and there's some people who can make beautiful arrangements and complicated chord progressions to sound like him. But like marrying those two things, like there's a very small amount of people who can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, the ending of the tune Chicago, I wanted to bring this back up because you mentioned you generally don't like loud or lots of sound, but the end of that tune is one of my favorite moments on the record, you know, with all the vocals and the horns and the drums and everything that's going on. Is that something that like, that's an exception for you? There's an asterisk
so
there.
Funny, dude. It's so funny you say that because the Illinois version of Chicago is my least favorite version. The version I listen to is the acoustic version on the Avalanche.
Oh, nice.
For that exact reason. Like literally that exact reason. Yeah. In the adult contemporary version on at the Avalanche, those are the two versions of Chicago I listen to.
Yeah. What's actually funny, and I feel bad, I don't mean to keep bringing her up, but like one of the first things I ever saw of Mree's was her Chicago cover, you know, back when she was first starting her YouTube days, you know, so that was one of my favorite versions too, is like when she's just, you know, she was super young, I think, when she did that, but
I don't think I've seen that one.
Oh man, you got to go watch it now after you get off here.
Back into the archives.
Yeah, back in the YouTube archives. Yeah, but that was actually my introduction to this record too, was, you know, hearing that. So just
that's cool.
Crazy how it works that way. But yeah,
that's the song I learned how to sing a harmony. Like, I remember vividly, like the first harmony ever being like, wait, I think I get this. Was like that was the acoustic version of that song because it's really stripped down. And there's just like two voices singing harmony, and I was like, I feel like I can hear the harmony. And like before then, you know, when I was like 10, that was like when my brain came online listening to that record.
Mm-hmm. Totally. One more question I had for you regarding this one is what I think is interesting and like some of the through lines in both your work and when we're talking about this record is I understand most of your projects have been like either entirely self-produced or, you know, when you're producing records, it's like mostly you. What is it? And the Sufjan record was entirely him. What is it that's enticing about like working mostly alone as a producer as opposed to collaboration? Yeah. And do you think that's intentional because of works like this?
I've always been drawn to people who do things themselves. I mean, there's so much to be said about how beautiful, like the energy of like like whatever, like Nirvana or something, like, you know, those songs like come together with like the energy of those songs is very much in part due to the musicians playing the songs. For me personally, like the things I've always really gravitated towards like have been somewhat isolated, like people just doing everything themselves. And I think probably for the reason of just it's one singular vision. Like it's a very, and even if the vision maybe could have been like better, whatever better means, or different in a great way, if you had like a bunch of different minds all collaborating, like I'm really drawn to like feeling of a singular vision. I really like that. And so for me, when I'm producing, it's like, I mean, and also for me, a lot of it's just like, I would love to have my amazing friend drummer come play this song, but like, I can sort of play it and I'm here right now and I really got to keep this shit moving. You know what I mean? So I just like, will do it. Like that's what a lot of it comes down to is like, just, it saves time and money. And like, I can just like keep it moving faster.
Yeah.
Cause I know what I feel like a lot of times it takes me a while to figure out what I do want. Like, I don't always, like, I'm not one of those people who just like knows exactly what I want as like an idea. And I'm like, hey, play this thing with like this. And that's what I want. Like, I need to sort of stumble through it for an hour to like figure out exactly what I am hearing. And so I feel bad like putting a musician through that of being like, can you just sort of like tinker for an hour and then I'll figure out exactly what I want you to play. Like, that's kind of rude. So it's just kind of ended up that way where I do everything myself.
And how is that affected when you're talking about now collaboration as a producer, either with any of the artists you've worked with, right? Whether it's your wife or your sister or anyone, you know, has that been difficult?
Well, I figured at first it was just because like you're on a schedule and you're trying to get you have shit to do, and so like it seems like self-indulgent to like I'm going to work on this guitar pattern for an hour, you know. But what I've realized is I need space on my own to come up with, if I'm really going to come, like I can write a song like right now with you, we can make a song, but like, it's not going to be something that's special to me unless I have like a little bit of space and a little bit of time to like really try to figure out what it is I'm trying to say and like what I want to play. Like, you know, I've found that I need some space. So like, I'll be like, what Mree and I do, for instance, now is like, instead of sitting in a room and trying to write a song together, like that's just not our thing. Like, and that's not my thing with really anyone. A few people, but like it's very rare. What I'll do is be like, hey, let's come up with an idea. Or if you have an idea, or if I have a song starter or a chord progression or whatever, and then like, let me take that and just like do my thing for like 3 hours. And then I'll show you what I've done. And then we can edit it based off of that. But like, I do need like some time to like get my vision straight. Cause if I'm like in a room with someone, I'm, you know, the social thing and like, you're trying to like have a great idea right away. And like the pressure of that can sometimes just make the writing like, I don't know, you kind of go to like the easiest answer or like the low hanging fruit starts to look appealing. Cause you're like, well, I know this will work sort of. Like, you don't really want to take chances. Cause it's like, you don't want to seem like you're having bad ideas.
Wow, that's awesome.
But for me, I need to have like 20,000 bad ideas before I can come up with a good idea. So that's just how I am.
I feel like I was the same way a lot, but as a drummer, like I have to just cater to what the artist needs, you know? So like, there's a lot of nope, they asked for something and I just got to take 20 stabs in the room, you know, cause there's no other options, you know?
Totally.
Yeah. But if I could, in an ideal world, I'm like, just send me the track and I'll come up with something good, you know, like that would
be. Totally. I think a lot of people like would benefit from that. But yeah, it's hard when you're in a band setting and you're like playing a role like that. You're like, all right, on the fly.
Totally. Well, let's go ahead and move on to your last one here, the book, Patti Smith's Just Kids. How were you introduced to that and why is it here on your Pop 5?
This book came out when I was a senior in high school. In high school, I didn't really read for pleasure that often. Like I played sports and I was involved in like a lot of other things. Like it wasn't like, I never like reached for a book, like cause it was for school, you know, like you had to read so much for school. So it was like the last thing I would want to do. And then when I graduated, my mom gave me this book. It was getting a lot of like praise at that time. And she thought I might like it because I was getting really into music at the time. So she gave me it and I went off to college in Seattle. That year had like a lot of anxiety and just trying to adjust to like living on a tiny island your entire life. And now you're like in a major city. And this was just sort of like the thing that I could like go into this book and like just feel calm and like peace. Like her writing style is just so beautiful and like poetic and she's able to find like beautiful ways of describing like the most mundane things. Like she's so good at that. Like she'll like, you know, she'll make like watching TV in your hotel room sound like the most poetic shit ever. And I'm like, well, hey, I do that. Like, I guess you don't have, like it was this shift of like feeling like you needed to find this thing that had all this meaning. And then in a really profound way, describe that thing or that feeling. And she was sort of more like, find anything and then you assign the meaning to it. Like, you don't need to find some profound, amazing thing that no one's ever thought about and then, you know, put that into words or into a song. Yeah. You can do that with any single thing. And so I would just read this book I read it like 4 times that year. It was just like constantly going back to it and realizing like, that was what I wanted. The relationship with her and Robert Mapplethorpe in the book, like I wanted something like that. Like I wanted like a relationship where you were each other's muses. Like you were working together creatively. Like you were like a creative team and you were feeding off each other. And like there was that give and take, like creatively. I'd never had that before. And so in another way, like it sort of helped me define like what I wanted in terms of a partner. Like I hadn't really realized that until this book.
Yeah. For the audience, just some background. This book was written, it's a memoir of Patti Smith's earlier years, kind of before fame, you know, and her early relationship with her partner, Robert Mapplethorpe, and kind of what that looks like before they both became the, you know, insanely popular artists that they were. What I wanted to ask about this is, I know there are many elements of this that are, you're looking back on a specific time, you know, by the time she wrote this, it was, you know, so many years had passed from those time periods. And so putting yourself in that time period without all this other information that's kind of informing the way you look back on this, do you think any of it was like romanticized? And I know it was something you were longing for. Do you think it, in hindsight or knowing kind of that it can potentially be looked at with rose-tinted glasses in some ways, that it could affect I know people have fantasies of like, I want something like this, but maybe that's not ultimately, realistic in some ways? Or do you think it painted a good enough picture of reality?
I mean, it was really very, very hard for me to find that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to search far and wide, and then luckily I found Mree, and then have that now. But I don't know. I feel like she. I mean, I'll never know if she's romanticizing it for the sake of reading. But even if she did, like all we have are our memories anyway. You know? So it's like, who's to say? Like, if our memories remember something a certain way, then is that real? Like why is that any less real than the way it actually happened? Because the way you remember it's the way it exists to you now.
Yeah, that's true. Good point. I just was wondering if it was like, one of the things that I think kind of captures it is, I think what informed the title of this is there was a point that they're, walking around and they came across someone looking at them, and it was a man and wife, and they were saying, hey, they were wanting to potentially take a picture of them. And the man disagreed, said, no, those aren't artists. Those are just kids, and that's why it's called just kids. Yeah. And so when you think about like that, I mean, that is one perception and one way of looking at things, right? And so I guess like my larger point is that like you see it all the time with like Hollywood couples or like TV shows where you want some idealistic version of what is presented for you. And maybe when you're reading this type of story, like, is it harder then to like be able to actually accept that there's also shit that comes with, relationships as well? It's not always,
for sure. Yeah. I do think it was hard. It did make it hard, actually. Yeah. Now that I think back on that time, because it was really hard for me to find something that felt like that lived up to that sort of dynamic that was spelled out in that book, that I was sort of like latched onto for a few years. So there was a few years there where like, I mean, that's part of the reason why I went to school in Minneapolis or in Minnesota, because I was just like, if this isn't going to happen naturally, like I'm just going to like go off and focus on music, and like didn't really see many people that year that I was there.
Yeah. You mentioned one more thing. I wrote down a line that I really loved from the book where you talked about how she can just explain something so beautifully, right? Something simple, but so beautifully. And the line is, we gathered our colored pencils and sheets of paper and drew like wild feral children into the night until exhausted, we fell into bed. Like something like that, where it's just like explaining this relationship where I can see kind of what I was alluding to, like, that sounds beautiful. Like I want to have that same feeling,
Right?
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like it's all the same feeling. Like it's like that feeling in Eternal Sunshine on the Train, and that feeling like with the horn arrangement in Casimir Pulaski Day in Illinois, and that feeling in like, the early, or in Zelda, like in the Rainy Hyrule, like there's like this certain feeling that like just makes me feel so happy. Even though it's like kind of a sad feeling, like I feel like it would be considered like generally sort of sad.
Yeah.
But there's something about sad shit I'm just into. Like all my favorite shit is sad. Like, I don't know.
I'm with you. I'm the exact same way. And I think that's why I gravitate towards your work, because I think it's just incredible. But
oh, thanks, man.
Well, we'll get you out here. Before we do though, we have 5 rapid fire questions that we ask at the end of every show here. So first question here, Henry, if you could choose to be on a reality TV show, which one would you choose?
I want to say an answer. It's so not real. It's so not actually true. But Mree and I have been watching Too Hot to Handle.
No, it's in Too Hot to Handle.
and just laughing so hard. And so I got to say that.
All right, deal.
Or no. Yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to be anywhere near that show, like anywhere near, but that's just the fun answer, so I'm going with that.
I love it. It's in. If people have never consumed any of your pop 5, what's the one that you'd want them to go experience right now?
I think the Sufjan record.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
You might have already answered this throughout the interview now that I get to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Where's a place that you like to go for inspiration?
I mean, I just have this little crevice, and you guys can't see, but like, it's just like, I have all my pedals and my guitar and like my keyboard and just like my little workstation. And that's like kind of where I go. Nice. When I just like just having a bunch of tools all right near you where you can just like not think and just like twist knobs and get weird. Like that's kind of where I'll go. Nice. I thought you were going to say Orcas, but this is a better answer because it's different. I was thinking of Orcas, but like Orcas is usually where I go to get stuff done. Like I don't usually go there trying to like to find I don't something. Usually write there for something like I'm usually writing at home with in Portland. Awesome.
Okay. Who's an artist that you'd love to work with?
Sufjan.
Perfect. Last question here. What habit or quality do you think has contributed most to your success so far?
Probably perfectionism.
Hey.
I have a problem with that.
Yeah.
with music.
Yeah.
Which is why I release music so infrequently.
Sure.
I'll spend like 2 weeks editing something.
Yeah. Well, man, I am such a fan of your work. Is there anywhere that anything you want to promote? I know you said you're working on a new record, or where can people follow you to wait for that announcement?
Yeah. If you follow me on Instagram or social media or go to my website, I'm going to be releasing, I have a bunch of new music coming out in the next year. So stay tuned for that.
Amazing. Where can they follow you?
Instagram at Henri Bardot, Bardot.
Amazing. And we'll put
Henri. People always, yeah.
We'll put it here in the episode description as well, so people can just click on that and go find that. But awesome. Well, Henri, it's such a pleasure. I'm such a fan of your solo work and Perlo and all the stuff you've produced. I can't wait to hear this new record. So we'll promote the shit out of it, and we're just so happy you're here.
You guys are awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good talking.
Thank you.
That'll do it for today's show. As I mentioned at the start, we have a really special treat. A sneak peek of Henri's newest single, Sleep It Off, which will be out on March 10th. We're so grateful that we get to listen to the song, so please support Henri in any way that you can. We're going to post all the links to all of his socials in the episode description. In the meantime, remember to share this episode with your friends, as we will pick a new winner this week and get you that next thing that may show up on your Pop 5. Congratulations to last week's winner, Carrie Santillana. We'll see you next time, but until then, what's your Pop 5?
I'm walking it off, another night out, dark enough for you to sleep it off. Staring at your phone, I see the smile used to try to give you. Am I out of time? Is this how we always were? I honestly don't remember much these days. What's wrong with